Hello, and welcome to the Race, Wealth, and Health Podcast, a podcast that serves to educate and empower while we explore the intersections of social justice, economic empowerment, and holistic well-being within communities of color. I am your host, Dr. Joycelyn Morris, and I invite you to join me as we dive deep into the crucial topics that shape our lives, challenge the status quo, and strive for a more equitable future for all. This week, we're back with guest Chelsea Ransom Cooper for part 2 of our conversation on the importance of financial management and planning. Let's tune in. The first question I was going to ask or mention, it doesn't surprise me in terms of the amount of your clients that are both in women of color and specifically Black women, because we know that Black women are among the largest groups of earning degrees in education right now in terms of the increases that we're seeing. So a lot of our peers, we're working more, we're making more money, and we're having to think about these things, our financial futures and our retirement. But then the other thing that you mentioned when you were saying in terms of finding those particular individuals and working with them, how do you, or I should say, what are some of the most kind of common things that you hear or sort of have to debunk when it comes to working with clients?
Yeah, so I think one of the most common things that I typically do have to debunk is that a financial advisor is just going to tell them they can't do anything, that they can't live their life, that they can't enjoy anything. And I think that's a lot of the assumption that individuals will come to us with, or some of the hesitation that they'll have is, oh, you're going to tell me I need to stop and change everything. And it's like, no, that's actually not the case. We want to make sure that you're doing things that are aligned with your values and your goals. And we just want to adjust and make sure that we're not focused on things that aren't aligned with those items. So I think that's a core component. Then I think there's always an assumption too, where people are like, well, I need to get my financial house in order first before I talk to you. And it's like, well, actually, this is what we're here to help you with, right? Like, we're here to help you get the financial house in order. So we don't necessarily want you to wait too late, because time is also our most precious asset when it comes to building wealth and making sure we're going in the right direction too. So I think some of those things can sometimes hold people back from reaching out for the help that they truly do need. And then the last one I would say is understanding there is a lot of financial advice, I would say, or guidance or information you can find online, but you really do need to make sure that you're finding things that are specific to you. So just because somebody is posting it or sharing it doesn't mean it actually is the best recommendation for you. And I think that's where having somebody in your corner or having that financial professional can help you understand, okay, this is specific to me. This isn't for anybody else. This person is giving me this advice because they understand me and they know it's the best option for me.
And something just came to mind that you did say earlier in talking about that investment advice that's specific. You had mentioned even providing investment advice to individuals and not necessarily in terms of what it means for them to plan, individuals who aren't boomers, et cetera. So I guess the first part of my question is, do the majority of your clients, or are there certain trends in terms of kind of generationally where your clients are? But even from there, with that being said, maybe kind of what are some of the things that you have to, I don't want to say debunk again, but sort of some of the things you have to educate them on because they are maybe of a different generation than their parents, which typically we are, we learn what we learn, especially what we learn first about money through what we see or what we're told by our parents and or caregivers. So yeah, curious, first part, kind of what's the generational mix? And then what are some things that you have to sort of work or kind of reteach when it comes to the particular generations that you're typically working with?
And I'm smiling as you say that because we call a lot of our clients first generation wealth accumulators. So they're typically the first in their family to be making the level of income that they're making, which is always a blessing, right? But it comes with some unique instances and unique problems if you can't necessarily ask anyone in your family how to handle these situations because they're not necessarily there. The average client age for us is also 41. So I would say on average, our clients skew on the lower side to about 30, and then on the higher side to about 60 right now. I would say everyone is like 30 to 60, with the majority between that 40 and 55 area who we're working with. So they're starting to also be in that sandwich generation, right? So they're taking care of their parents, they have young kids, they have childcare. And we realize like that is one of the reasons that they are starting to reach out. They realize that they need some assistance because they got a lot going on. There's
Hmm.
all these different pieces. How do we prioritize and figure out which one makes the most sense? How do we make sure things don't slip through the cracks because we forgot one because we were focused on something else? So I think when we think about those first generation wealth accumulators and all that they have to carry, we want to make sure that they're able to make some of those smart decisions too. But I always have to remind them that a lot of our parents didn't have to juggle all these different things for retirement like we do, right? The
Fair.
Roth IRA and 401k did not exist for them at that time. A lot of them had access to pensions. This has been something that has changed in this country where before in the past, Social Security and pensions, and then you would call it a day. You would stay at that same company and you would be fine. But now the weight and the burden is now pushed back on us individually to make sure we are taking care of ourselves. That is just another thing that we need to make sure we're planning for. So, again, I always try to lead with grace and provide that education as to, like, yes, you feel like you're juggling a lot because you are. But what we can do is try to come up with a plan and systems to make sure that nothing slips through the cracks.
Yeah. And so, what are the top 2 to 3 things that you find yourself kind of constantly encouraging, or even what you would tell someone as they're thinking about engaging with a financial planner? 2 to 3 things that they should really keep in mind when it comes to understanding their finances and even just thinking about planning.
So I think the first thing I would say is making sure that they are prioritizing their future self. And specifically, I would say retirement planning, I got to say, is a non negotiable. I think you and I can both agree we've either had friends or family members, or I know I even go into the store sometimes and I'll see there's an older person in there who's working in there. And sometimes my heart breaks, right? And I'm like, I don't necessarily want our clients, friends, family members to be put in that position. So if we can have these conversations, even if they're uncomfortable now, it's still better to make sure that we're all taken care of because there's a certain time in life where we won't want to work. And frankly, we shouldn't have to,
Yep.
right? Shouldn't have to. So
That
how
time
can
is not for me, to be clear.
that time was yesterday, right? No. But how can we make sure that we're really prioritizing that? Because this is also one of the few things in life we can't take a loan out for.
Right.
We
No,
can
you're
get
right.
a loan for the car, for the home, if we want to increase our education or income potential, but we cannot take a loan out when we want to retire.
That's
So
true.
we need to make sure that we're prioritizing this and we have a plan in place. And then I would also say making sure that, especially for women, equity and ownership is the most important thing. There was a tagline I had that was pay her in equity, meaning that I wanted all women to make sure that they were getting access to appreciating assets, whether it's stocks, businesses, real estate, and
Mhm.
understanding that the best way to make sure that their money can stand the test of time is to make sure that it has access to continuously appreciate. The individuals who I've seen really turn their wealth into significant wealth overnight have had access to equity, whether it's in their company stock, they started a business, or they had access to significant assets like real estate or individual stocks that did really well. And I truly fundamentally believe that we all do need access to businesses so that we can really see our wealth significantly grow.
One of the things you mentioned, and I imagine this would be a good question for you, is when someone does come to you, what are the top 2 to 3 main reasons or catalysts that a client would come to you? Because I was going to say, I would assume most folks are coming talking about retirement planning, but
Mhm.
that may or may not be true.
I would say some of the most common things that we're seeing when individuals reach out, they want to have that health check to see where they're like, I feel like I'm doing good, right? I feel like I'm doing good, but I don't actually know. And
Mhm.
I don't know what I don't know. So the same way I go to my doctor, the same way I go to a dentist to get a checkup and see how I'm doing, I would like to have, that financial checkup to make sure that I'm doing what I need to be doing and I'm not missing anything. I would say that is probably the most common. And then the second one, similar to what I was saying, is when people just feel like they're juggling so much and they've reached the point where it's time to outsource this. The same way where I say everyone probably will graduate from TurboTax at a certain point, or they'll graduate from all these different areas and you'll realize I just need somebody to do this for me. I need to focus on other aspects of my life. For me, it was when I got a cleaning lady. So for everyone, it's different things.
Yeah.
But I would say that's also a core moment when individuals will say, you know what, I think it's time that we have somebody who just solely focuses on this for us.
Hmm. And why do you think, or what is your belief around the importance of financial planning, specifically when we think about in communities of color?
So I do believe that financial planning, and I'm sure I've probably beat a dead horse now, but I do believe that access to high quality financial advice has the potential to change our relationship with the financial services industry, but in turn can also help to change some of the racial and gender wealth gaps that we have in this country.
Mhm.
So I think we can both agree that we know that, and the Black community has not had a positive relationship with financial services, whether it was due to redlining, whether it was just discrimination in regard to banking processes and procedures. There's been so many things that have held us back from really having proper access to good advice. And we're now trying to play catch up as best we can. But I also noticed that there's new layers of potentially having misinformation, right? Reading a statistic that said stock market participation, specifically among Black investors, has risen significantly, right? And now the majority of investors under 40 are actually Black, which is positive. But then some of the risks that we can explore are, there's mistrust and lack of guidance as to what we're investing in.
That's true.
And the amount of times that I go through or I'll onboard a client and we'll look at their investment portfolio and I was like, hey, you have these positions. Why do you have them? And they say, I don't know. Or I heard something on TikTok, or I heard something from a friend of a friend. And that's where our intent is so pure. Like, we know we need to build wealth. We want to do these things. But if we're getting misinformation or wrong information, then our money is not necessarily growing and it could actually be detrimental or hold us back even further. So
Mhm.
why I really say we need access to high quality financial advice that is actually going to push us forward and not set us backwards.
Absolutely. And what are some of your top two, three most commonly asked questions? I know we talked about why clients would come to you, but kind of like as they're working with you, what do you find tends to come up most in your conversations with clients?
Yeah, I would say after we get through some of the goals things and some of the things we mentioned before, I would say we have a lot of conversations to educate them around investments. So, how do investments work? How do you create an investment portfolio? Because we always want to make sure that our clients feel educated, because of course we can do it for them, but that's not actually setting them ahead, right? Like, if I just do it
Sure.
for you, when do you really get to learn? So, we always want to make sure that we're communicating effectively and educating people along the way so they can understand the why behind all of our recommendations. So, like, why are we recommending that we want to be 100% invest in the stock market in your retirement account? Or why do we want to maybe have some bonds because you're getting closer towards retirement and we want to preserve your money and maybe not take on as much risk as we would if you were 10, 20 years younger, right? So,
Mm.
helping people to understand and see some of the differences is something that we really focus on. And then, of course, taxes, which I think is very timely because of now,
Yeah.
as we're having this conversation, the One Big Beautiful Act, that is the name, it came out, I believe, 2 weeks ago now. But a lot of those things will have significant impact on what our taxes could look like.
Mhm.
And I know for a lot of our clients, and even when I was at that prior firm, we were on these things immediately to make sure that we're maximizing the deductions as effective as possible. So I'm really grateful that now we can bring these conversations to our clients so we can say, hey, this just came out. These are the changes that we need to start planning around, right? We're not going to wait until December or even next year when it's time to file. Like, it's time to strategize now.
What, because I know you mentioned one of the things about having a financial planner is that they're able to kind of help you understand what's changing because things are always kind of constantly changing. And so I know you mentioned the One Big Beautiful Act, but what are some of the other things that you've seen maybe in the last year, some changes that you and your firm have sort of been keeping a close eye on and or informing your clients about?
So I would say some additional items are, of course, student loans, right? So making sure that we have clarity around what's going on. So when it comes to whether it's the pause or it's not the pause or some of the new repayment options like the save plan, we always want to stay on top of those. And we send out rapid responses to our clients so that they know what's going on to stay on top of that. And then I would also say when it comes to investments and unfortunately a lot of the layoffs that have occurred.
Yes.
Seen significant clients have to go through transitions and try to find that next job and that next opportunity. I think a lot of the peace of mind that we can give is, making sure that they're prepared for those instances. So these conversations were a lot harder to have, I would say in 2020 and 2021, where I
Yeah.
felt like the name of the game was just keep asking for a higher salary. No matter how high you go, they're going to match it because everyone was hiring so aggressively.
Yep.
And then there were significant layoffs because they realized they overhired.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of individuals, it's taking up to 6 months, if not longer, to find another opportunity. So this is why it's so important to make sure, we have that emergency fund, or that if you are paid in equity, which a lot of these big tech companies do, how are we able to pull that aside and make sure that you have a nest egg there? Or, some of these companies where I've had a client who worked at a company where they received equity and it went up a ton. When the company went public, it did really, really well. But then over time, it's come back quite a bit. And now the company's been dancing around, potential bankruptcy. So in those instances, right, those are where we want to capitalize on when the stock is performing really well and get that liquidity, get that cash out of that so we can set it aside and put it in a broader diversified portfolio so that they can retain their assets and not have the level of risk that it comes from having just one stock. Now we have a pool of ETFs or index funds, which are up to 500 to 3,000 individual stocks. Now we have broader exposure versus just that one company. This is how we're really helping people plan with some of the immediate things that have come up and making sure that they're still set up for success.
Mm-hmm. Very basic level setting for some of our listeners. You mentioned index funds, but if you wouldn't mind kind of breaking it down for and why those things, which I know is a lot about diversification, and you don't have to have such high barriers to entry because you're able to. But if you wouldn't mind explaining for the listeners.
Absolutely. So when it comes to an index fund, these are broad indexes that will have a pool of stocks. The way that I like to explain it to clients are think about as a stock is like one song, where an ETF or an index fund can be like a playlist. So
Mm-hmm.
depending on the different theme, there can be quite a few, right? So there's different things. There's like the S&P 500, which is the top 500 companies in the US.
Mm-hmm.
There's ones like the NASDAQ or the QQQ, which are some of the top tech companies. We also have the Dow Jones Industrial Average, which are the top 30 more blue chip US names as well. So there's different themes for each of these indexes. And then what you can do is you can buy exchange traded funds, which maneuver similar to stocks on the public stock market, but you get that broad exposure to multiple hundreds of stocks depending on what the index fund is. So there's an S&P 500 ETF, which matches the S&P 500 index. So instead of trying to figure out what is the one stock that's doing well, you get access to 500 different stocks.
Mm-hmm.
And the benefit is because sometimes people will ask me, and they're like, well, Chelsea, isn't investing risky, right? Like the stock market, it goes up and down. You just mentioned a company could go bankrupt. And I'm like, yes, that is true, right? The stock market does have levels of risk involved. But this is why we want to make sure that we have broad exposure. And when we're talking about these index funds or exchange traded funds specifically, and I'll use the S&P 500 as an example, if one company goes down, you still have access to 499 companies, right? That is why you want to have that broad market exposure because it can help you reduce some of the risk in your portfolio and also alleviate some of the stress of trying to figure out which one is the winner. I promise there's people who are paid a lot of money who try to figure out which
Yeah.
company is going to be the winner. And it is very, very difficult and it is very time consuming. But these ETFs can help you have a bit more of a hands off approach. So you still have that broad exposure and you can still get some competitive returns in the stock market.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you so much. I think one of the things I was going to ask you, I think we kind of talked about it. We wove it into the conversation, but I want to ask it more explicitly, which is, how do you see race, wealth, and health, obviously the three tenets of this podcast, intersect with the work that you're doing?
So I would say, I think race, wealth, and health, which I love that. The way that I see it intersect is I think wealth can impact our mental health, right?
Mhm.
We think about how we've had exposure to wealth in this country. A lot of us have had a lot of difficulties. So, and I think about even myself, right? So my race has impacted the level of wealth that my family has been able to
Mhm.
bring to me. And then in turn, when I was born, what I had access to. That in
Mhm.
turn impacted my stress and my mental health. So I
Right.
shared that story specifically around, how I felt about the student loans and how
Mhm.
that triggered a moment for me where I felt this fight or flight, but for me, I felt like I was going to solve a problem. It could have went the other way around, but for me, I felt like I was going to solve a problem. And that did impact where I was stressed, my mental health, how I was showing up at work was being impacted, how I was showing up as a daughter, as a friend was being impacted too. And I do believe that if you're always worried about money, it is just harder to focus on your well being and to make sure that you're taken care of. So I do believe that all of these things tie in together to
Mhm.
make sure that we're able to achieve our financial goals, but also just to make sure that our mindset is right so that we can be effective too.
I mean, because it's not, I think sometimes people think about the idea of wealth is like, oh, you want to be wealthy. I don't want to be wealthy. It's not really about, I mean, wealthy is good, but it's really
Yeah,
just about the idea that money and wealth directly affect health, both physical health outcomes as well as the mental health. And it's important to be able to have a better quality of life when one has a strong handle on their finances, right? Like,
yeah,
and they aren't feeling like they're, surviving and just kind of living day to day, but at least in an opportunity where not only are their basic needs met, but at least some, if not a majority, of their wants and their desires. Like to me, everyone should be able to have that. What Chelsea's wants and desires are could look very different than Joycelyn's, right? Like it doesn't have
yeah.
to be the same. Our financial goals very well may be different, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't still have those financial goals, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why even for a lot of us who are financial planners, we've changed or haven't really leaned into the traditional wealth management terms as much
Mhm.
as before because I feel like it is very exclusive and it doesn't make people feel included or welcome if they don't believe that they have wealth. So a lot of us are transitioning to more, financial life planning, right? Like how are we making sure that it's not just about spreadsheets and numbers, which is table stakes, but how are we really helping you life plan?
Yeah, I see it as almost like as you've been talking, and I think you even made the comparison earlier, it's almost like a financial coach, thinking about it as a coach, right? It's like a trainer, right? It's someone who's helping you understanding what your individual goals are, not necessarily telling you what you need to be, but helping you then figure out a plan to get there, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So what would you say, Chelsea, is next for you and or the company? Like what are you guys working on? What's new?
So we actually just hired a new advisor. So he's based out of Charlotte. So that's been super exciting. Our passion and our purpose is also to make sure that we are increasing the number of diverse financial planners and advisors in this profession. So now it's been 5 years since creating Zenith, but I found other people along the way who felt the same way. Some people who even unfortunately felt like leaving the profession. And I was like, no, we need us here. We need us here in this space so much. So I'm really grateful and fortunate that Zenith can be that space for top tier diverse financial planners and advisors to come and work with the people who inspired them to be financial planners in the first place. So that's something that we're really excited about, continuing to launch webinars and partnerships to continue to educate our community on how to improve financial literacy, but also how to improve our financial outcomes by finding more opportunities for income. So we're actually doing an event in Martha's Vineyard to help encourage more Black women to join corporate boards and how to get access to that and exploring different income opportunities through that. So we're doing a lot. Yeah, we're doing a lot of fun things, but it's still aligned with our mission, which has been really exciting.
No, that's amazing. And I just want to confirm for our listeners who may be interested once we get to the point and give them your website and all of that, that if someone wanted to work with you, do they have to be in the same state or located in the same area as you guys?
We are a national SEC registered firm. We can work with anyone anywhere in the US. Our team is from Boston to Charlotte. So we
Okay.
have New York, Philly, DC, and Boston and Charlotte. But we can work with individuals anywhere in the US.
Awesome. And as we sort of wrap up, Chelsea, what's a quote that maybe you live by or even a book that you have found to be just very foundational in the way that you think about and approach your planning and work?
So my favorite personal finance book will always be The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel.
Okay.
It's one of my favorite ones. It's simple but deep, but it's really about how your mindset can shape your financial outcomes. And I love the way that he articulates and shows like, yes, we can do the numbers and all of these things, but what really matters more than anything is your mindset and making sure that you have a mindset that is ready for wealth and ready to receive wealth. Then from there, you will be ready for the accountability and the next steps that it truly takes to build it.
Yeah.
I love the way he presents it. I actually met him and I told him, it was my favorite book. And he was like, you should tell people you wrote it. So I may start to tell people I wrote it, but that one is definitely one of my favorites that I encourage everyone to read.
Awesome. And then, what are you hoping that our listeners will take away from today's conversation?
I hope that they take away that you do not need to have $1 million, or you do not need to wait until you feel like your finances are fully set up to have a financial professional or an advisor. The best thing is to make sure that you have somebody in your corner so that you can get guidance, some structure, and that they can help encourage you as life throws you curveballs. So think of them as the same way, you want to make sure you have your doctor, your dentist to give you those health checkups, making sure you get your wealth checkups too.
Yeah. No, I love it. And truly, lastly, if people want to stay in touch with you and connect and learn more about either what you're doing individually and also obviously the work that you do with Zenith, how would they contact you? Website, social handles?
Yeah, so I'm very friendly. You can add me on LinkedIn. My full name, Chelsea Ransom Cooper. I promise I'll accept. And then we also have our website, which is zenithwealth.partners. If you'd ever like to explore working with us or learn more about the work that we're doing.
Awesome. Awesome, Chelsea. Thank you so much. This has been such a rich conversation. I'm really excited for our listeners to learn more about what it means for financial planning, and also for them to really have a resource of an organization that focuses on individuals that look like you and I, and gives them access. That those barriers to entry have been lowered and removed to having access to holistic wealth management.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kudos to you on all the work that you're doing. I'm so excited to have met you, and also excited to continue to follow your work and all the awesome things that you're doing.
Yes, and thank you so much. This was an awesome conversation.
Thank you. Well, that's all for today, folks. Enjoyed the show? Be sure to like and rate the podcast. You can find the Race, Wealth, and Health podcast on multiple platforms, including Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe and turn on your notifications so you never miss an episode. I also want to hear from you, so don't forget to connect with me on social media. You can follow the podcast on Instagram and Facebook at Race, Wealth, Health. By joining the online community, you'll stay updated on the latest episodes, behind-the-scenes insights, and engaging discussions. Share your thoughts, comments, and questions there. I appreciate your support in sharing the podcast with your friends, family, and colleagues who may also find value in these conversations. Thank you again for joining me on this journey. Until next time, take care, stay informed, and keep up the good fight for equality.